Go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our roundtable where we will be discussing the latest advancements in the practical use of AI technology. We appreciate you taking the time to join us. My name is Michelle Berkovich, and I am the Director of Customer Success at LogicStream and your host today. Before we begin, we have just a couple of housekeeping items. To avoid any background noise, your microphones will be muted throughout the webinar, so we encourage you to put questions in the Q&A section, and we will address them at the end of the session. If you experience any technical difficulties during the webinar, please let us know in the chat, and we will do our best to assist you. We are recording this session, and we'll share it with you afterwards. Let me now introduce our panel for today's discussion. We are delighted to welcome Jeremy Pierotti from Lucem Health. Jeremy is the General Manager of Solutions, where he oversees creation of AI solutions that deliver tangible clinical and financial benefits to providers and other customers. Before joining Lucem Health, Jeremy served as EVP of Cloud Solutions at Rhapsody, which purchased the data integration business of Datica, where Jeremy was CEO and president. His 25 years career in health and IT includes leading EHR implementations at Stanford, Allina, and Tampa General Hospital. Welcome, Jeremy. We are happy to have Betsy Keenan-Brown joining us as well. Before jumping into the world of software development, Betsy spent nearly 20 years working for Minnesota Healthcare Systems in a variety of analytics and technology leadership roles, where she deployed her dedication to, or developed her dedication to leveraging data for betterment of healthcare. She is currently the EVP of Clinical Informatics and Data Science at LogicStream Health. And lastly, Pete Ketchum, our moderator for today's session. Pete is the EVP of Customer Success and Product Management at LogicStream. That means he helps keep customers happy by bringing their needs and requirements to a development team that never seems to get tired of big new ideas. We're excited to get the discussion started, so over to you, Pete.
Thanks, Michelle. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. So, as you already know from the invitation, today's topic is the practical use of AI technology in healthcare. And so we'll be talking in general terms about recent advancements in artificial intelligence. We'll explore how AI is being applied in healthcare today to improve the lives of patients and improve the way health systems run their operations. And we'll also take a little bit of time to describe the product developed by Lucem Health, which is an AI platform. And the reason for that is it does serve as a good example of the practical use of AI. And also because we think that some of you might be interested in using the Lucem product at your health system. I'm your moderator for today, and Betsy and Jeremy are the experts, so they'll do most of the talking. But before we get there, I want to just mention a couple of things by way of context and background. So the first thing is to explain why LogicStream is organizing a webinar on AI in the first place. And most of you on the call, you work at a health system that licenses one or more of our end user applications, clinical process improvement, or the drug shortages application, or the drug diversion application. And maybe you don't think of us so much as a quote AI company. And we don't really mention AI front and center when we tell our story as a company, but AI is becoming more and more baked into what we do. We've built and deployed machine learning models in our drug shortages application and our drug diversion application. And these days, like a lot of other companies, we're exploring ways to use AI ourselves in our day-to-day work developing software. And I expect what I just described about LogicStream is probably true and becoming more true of health systems. You might not be AI companies per se, but you're going to find that it's increasingly important to develop expertise in AI technologies and to use AI in new ways just to stay competitive. The second thing I want to say is I just want to explain why Lucem is here, because back to those LogicStream software applications I mentioned, the thing to know about LogicStream software applications is they're the tip of the iceberg. They all sit on top of this big software infrastructure that LogicStream has built. And the infrastructure does important things, like it manages how we receive information from your EHR system and from other data sources. And the infrastructure transforms all that source data into a LogicStream data model so that we can do things with it. And a couple of years ago, we realized that the infrastructure can multitask. It's essential for making it possible to run our end user applications, but it can also, that same infrastructure can also be used to help you capitalize on your data assets. It can help you to be really efficient about delivering large, complex clinical data sets to the outside organizations that you choose to work with, to your supply chain partners, to clinical researchers, and maybe to digital health companies like Lucem. So now LogicStream is still, we still remain a SaaS company, an applications company, but we're also a data services company. And data services means we help you deliver data to those outside organizations of your choosing. And that's why we're partnered with Lucem. Our role in the partnership for the health systems that decide to use Lucem, our job is to simplify the process for you to deliver data to them. And what they do with it once they have it, you'll hear more about that as we talk more throughout this session. And that's it for my introductory comments. And I want to get our panel involved now. And I want to start with a question for Betsy. So Betsy, there's a lot of terminology flying around our industry and in the world in general today about AI. We're hearing about machine learning and supervised and unsupervised models and generative AI and large language models, and that can be kind of confusing. Can you just get us started by helping to make sense of some of this terminology that we're hearing?
Yeah, thanks, Pete. Happy to. Bringing up a very quick slide here because there is a lot of terminology, and there's methodologies and technologies that surround all of what we're talking about today in this realm, but we're really going to focus on three categories. So I think if we look at this in terms of a sophistication scale, that might help as well. So let's start at the bottom. Analytics and statistics. This is what we're all familiar with. It's what we've been using to help manage our operations and workflows for decades. And this is just straight math and algorithms that are harnessed and interpreted by a person in order to provide answers and insights. Think, reporting, data visualizations, and in the aspects of advanced analytics, there are capabilities to do predictive, prescriptive, descriptive analytics, but it's all very labor intensive and highly coded. If we go up the sophistication scale, next comes machine learning. This builds upon all the concepts from an analytics perspective, but really brings it to a new level where it can incorporate learning and modeling techniques that take vast amount of data, and then through algorithms and models, it can produce predictions and insights without having to be explicitly programmed. So that labor aspect, your technical debt goes way down. Finally, we've got artificial intelligence, a lot of hype and things picked up in the media right now around this. So it might be exciting to you or a little bit terrifying, but I'm personally really excited because I think that this is becoming something very real in healthcare and can drive a ton of value. And it's really about autonomous systems that are capable of performing sophisticated tasks that otherwise require a human to do it. And don't worry, the robots aren't coming to take your jobs tomorrow, but they have the power to make your job a lot easier.
Okay, so that helps. We know what some of the terminology means. And so Jeremy, let me ask you, can you talk a little bit about how for these different flavors of AI, can you talk about recent advancements and especially how some of these recent advancements are likely to benefit healthcare?
I should unmute first. Yeah, thanks, Pete. Glad to be here. So certainly there's been great excitement lately as researchers and practical developers of AI have looked at using large language models, the things that power ChatGPT and other tools like that, looking at how to take that technology and apply it to healthcare in ways such as automating documentation for physicians and other providers, responding to patient messages. I've seen stories about EHR vendors taking that technology and rapidly starting to prototype or even release beta versions of those features. And then if you go back a decade or more, you certainly see that AI has been used in radiology, assisting physicians with reading studies. AI models have been used as part of clinical surveillance tools for sepsis identification, for infection control, because those tools take in very large amounts of data coming in almost every second. And so AI and machine learning algorithms have been used to help make sense of that data and improve the ability of those tools to point caregivers, care team members to the patients that need their attention the most. There's certainly more and more usage in revenue cycle, especially difficult functions such as prior authorization. At Lucem, we've taken interest in a few new areas that may seem sort of basic, but we think that are important and broadly applicable. So one is patient targeting and early disease detection using already existing patient data or data that is created routinely. So that could be solutions that use EHR data to enhance targeting for patients that really need routine health screening, maybe more than a general member of the public. ECG-based models, ECG or EKG, depending on what country you're in. But those models are increasingly showing the ability to flag likely heart disease, such as low ejection fraction or AFib or pulmonary hypertension. So we're excited about that because certainly there's a shortage in the cardiology specialties. Image-based models, image-based algorithms, solutions that help specialties that have pretty severe staffing shortages. So many are probably aware of the shortage of sonographers. And so there are some very interesting recent development around using AI to help train people very quickly to get a good echocardiogram image and then to interpret that image using machine learning algorithms that not only provide a prediction, but also do the 230 measurements that a sonographer otherwise has to do as part of that activity. So all of that stuff we think is very exciting. It's focused on enhancing the clinical yield and the financial yield out of routine healthcare activities. And then certainly we're also interested in helping health systems that have pockets or maybe broadly a broad set of activities around AI development, AI model development, helping health systems turn those algorithms into solutions that provide real tangible value to the end users, to scale deployment of those solutions within their organizations, and then to commercialize those externally if we determine that's viable.
Okay. Thanks, Jeremy. And so, one of the things that you touched on there was the predictive capabilities of AI. Betsy, I want to go back to your sort of definition of terms. Can you talk about how all predictions are not the same and how the different technologies that you talked about before produce different sorts of predictions?
Yeah, great question. So let's go back to this slide here. Let's use an example. I think we're all hearing in the media that we've got a major drug shortage issue happening in this country. And it seems to be getting progressively worse, right? And so, how does AI, machine learning, and analytics fit into all of this? Bring this up here. So from that analytics and statistics perspective, at LogicStream, we've been working through a process to develop a machine learning model. It's live. Many of you are using this already that can predict shortages. Prior to this capability, analytics and statistics could deliver you, basic static reporting, maybe of inventory levels, the consumption or usage in your hospital, and then somebody would have to go through and analyze that and try and understand, okay, here's how I'm going to react to something that maybe looks like it's trending in the wrong direction. You might also have some basic predictive capabilities that allow you to, build a rules-based algorithm based on known variation to develop an insight in some way. But all of that has to be completely coded and then requires a lot of maintenance over time. And it really can't adjust or adapt to the changing conditions that are occurring in a health system. If we go up the stack here to machine learning, we really can start at that same basic level, but through supervised and unsupervised data learning techniques, models have the ability to harness these predictions much more at a much greater scale. It requires much less labor because you don't have to define the nuances of all the different rules, if then do this, and it can consume huge data sets. It allows you then to have much more predictive power and higher confidence in the output that's generated. On the AI front, this is where we're heading. Okay, great. We have all of this great knowledge, and now we want to take action. AI has the ability to detect, say, a shortage, identify the possible substitutes, and then account for any health system nuances that apply, through natural language processing of EHR records, mining the internet to understand special events occurring in your area. There's any number of examples that could be incorporated, but then also take the step of, okay, then based on all of these facts, we're going to go ahead and automatically place an order with your wholesaler for exactly what you need tailored to your health system. So it really can do that automation from beginning to end of identifying the problem and doing something about it.
Okay. Great. So so we've talked about what AI can do and how it's changing. This a question for either Betsy or Jeremy. What can you tell us about, at least as of right now, today, not so practical applications of AI? Where, Betsy, you mentioned the hype. And any thoughts on how health systems can avoid the hype and steer clear of areas of AI technology that aren't quite ready for prime time?
Sorry, Jeremy, you're on mute.
So sorry. I'm just going to stay off mute from now on because I'm obviously not capable of working the mute button. We start by looking at the science. Has the algorithm been published? Has it been published in a peer-reviewed journal? Has it been validated on a patient data set that approximates your data set? There's some really interesting examples of danger signs that came out of the pandemic. So, for example, one group looked at 415 published image-based COVID AI tools and concluded that none were fit for clinical use. A group in Cambridge trained its own model using a data set that contained a mix of scans when patients were lying down and standing up. And because patients scanned while lying down were more likely to be seriously ill, what the AI really learned was to predict COVID risk from a person's position. So it wasn't predicting COVID, it was predicting whether a person was lying down or standing up. And so those are examples of very well-intended development of AI, but developed very quickly, developed on limited data sets or a combination of data sets. There are other stories about data sets that mixed images of children and adults. And so what the AI model has learned to do is identify adult lungs, not kids' lungs. So understanding how the model fits your population, understanding how well it's been used for how long a period of time is important. And then as you hinted at, Pete, an algorithm in and of itself is not a solution. An algorithm is an engine to a car or a motor to an electric car, right? But it's not the whole thing. It has to work well or you're not going to get very far. But it certainly doesn't, the motor or the engine itself does not create the full user experience. And you need to have that. We've learned in healthcare the hard way over the last 25, 30 years in developing IT systems that you have to create meaningful, attractive, useful, elegant end user experiences for that software to deliver real value.
Okay, thanks, Jeremy. And we're getting to the point in the discussion where I think it makes sense to turn to Lucem and Lucem's product specifically and take a closer look. You've kind of touched on some aspects of this, Jeremy, but can you summarize what is Lucem's vision? How do you see Lucem entering the picture here for practical use of AI?
Yeah, absolutely. So we were created as a company by Mayo Clinic and a few other partners a little over 2 years ago as a recognition that a model is not a solution, that an algorithm needs data. It needs data that is to operationalize an algorithm, to make it useful, you have to ingest complex data sets. You have to normalize that data structure. In many cases, you may have to do some data transformations from one coding set to another. Then that data needs to be fed consistently into the algorithm. The algorithm will often produce a prediction that is a number between 0 and 1. That's not terribly useful to most consumers of those predictions. So what does that number really mean? Put it in context with other clinical data, and then offer a compelling, meaningful next step so that the end user can drive better patient care with it. So we look at wherever we can, how can we develop solutions that use existing data that are addressing the most compelling challenges that face providers today: staffing challenges, reimbursement challenges, the pressure to take increased financial risk, the increasing importance of quality measures. Any solution has to be financially compelling, right? Nobody's going to agree to deploy a solution that looks like it might drive better patient care, but it's going to cost us an extra $5 million a year, and we're going to lose $5 million net by deploying this, right? It's just not, that's not viable for provider organizations today, if it ever was. We also recognize that for providers, we think it's important to minimize workflow changes, to minimize disruptions in existing patient care processes. Very few care team members tell us that they've got any time to evaluate major changes in their workflows. So then what that means in total is you've got to design software that works well end to end, that ingests data in an efficient way, where you've got a well-validated, reliable algorithm, you're generating output that's useful, you're delivering predictions to somebody who can make good use of them. And then we think it's also important to provide longitudinal tracking of patient outcomes and reporting so that the user understands the value that they're getting from the software solution, and that the results can be fed back to the algorithm developer for continuous improvement of the model, and to the software developer, whether that's Lucem or a partner of ours, for improving the overall end-to-end software solution. As we all know, even moving a button from one location in the screen to another location in the screen can have a meaningful impact on utilization and outcomes. So we look at overall solution continuous improvement. And so that's our view, is that we could come up with all sorts of really fancy, sophisticated AI models that will require tons of technology infrastructure changes, tons of workflow changes that will require more staffing, not less. And it could sound great, but ultimately it's not going to deliver much value. And so we understand the need at this point in time for providers to get the maximum value from their technology investments.
So Jeremy, that's the big picture for Lucem. How about specifics? What can you say about one specific model that runs on the Lucem platform today? What does it do for patients? What does it do for the health systems using it?
Sure. So I'll give one example of a product that we have in market. It's called, it's part of our Reveal family of solutions, and this one is called Reveal for Lower GI. So the problem is that about a third of adults are overdue for colorectal cancer screening, screening of any kind, whether you're going to use the Cologuard or you're going to get a screening colonoscopy. About a third of US adults are overdue for their screening. And that's a particular problem because colon cancer is the fourth leading cause of death cancer death among adults in the US. So there's a huge opportunity. But among those third of patients who are overdue for screening, how could we target those patients who are most at risk, or at least who appear to be most at risk for colon cancer, and put extra effort, not ignoring anybody else, but put extra effort to reach out to those patients and encourage them to come in for a screening colonoscopy? So we found a model developer that had developed a model and deployed it on 3 continents, validated it on data sets in the Middle East, in the UK, and a couple of data sets in the US, where that model has been in use at a major US health system for the last 5 years. And we looked at how could we take that model and make it even more compelling. So this model takes very simple EHR data, some lab results, patient age, and biological sex. And the model identifies of patients who are overdue for their colonoscopy screening, which of those patients are most at risk for colon cancer. When presented with a simple work list, then the population health or care coordination teams at clinic systems or at hospital systems can take that list of patients, put extra effort into contacting those patients, can tell them that they've done a personalized review of that patient's record and they appear to be at higher risk. And hey, colon cancer can be cured if caught early. So we know it's not anybody's favorite thing to do to come in for a screening colonoscopy, but the juice is worth the squeeze. Maybe I shouldn't have used that analogy. Anyway, and so what's remarkable is that there's a track record of this working, right? In fact, at one provider, they published that 70% of patients, when presented with the results of this analysis, agreed to come in for a screening colonoscopy. And from a financial standpoint, it's very compelling because if you have that patient under some kind of capitated risk plan, you obviously want to identify colon cancer or a precursor to colon cancer, such as an advanced adenoma or even a polyp. You want to identify that as early as possible to minimize the cost of treatment and to maximize the patient's life expectancy and outcomes. And if you're being paid on a fee-for-service basis, well, cancer care is relatively profitable for most health systems. And so you're identifying patients who need cancer care and you're providing cancer care earlier so it's less expensive and you'll have better outcomes for the patient. So we think it's one of these great solutions where it's very simple, it requires no change in workflow by a primary care physician or by a GI physician or by anybody. It doesn't even really require a change in workflow by a population health team because most organizations already have efforts in place to contact patients who are in need of their standard screenings. So this just provides a little bit more targeting. And honestly, most providers would much rather provide care to patients who need their attention because they're going to get better clinical yield and better financial yield. It's great to do a screening colonoscopy on a patient whose results are clean, and you make a little bit of money off of that procedure, but it's not the best use of a skilled provider's talents.
Thanks, Jeremy. I have a follow-up question to what you've been talking about here. I have to put my health system hat back on. In my experience in looking at vendors, I always tended to have a healthy level of skepticism, right? Especially in the data analytics and AI space, there's so much magic behind the curtain, right? I'm just wondering if you're willing to describe a bit, how are you actually vetting model developers on your platform? It sounds like this example was very well established and mature model, but in the cases of new exciting opportunities, what is the process that you go through to make sure that this is something that is going to help healthcare?
Yeah. So thanks for that question, Betsy. We look at the publications on a model. We look at the data sets that were used to train and validate the model. We look at what kind of regulatory clearance the model developer may have received for that particular algorithm. Do they have FDA clearance? Do they have European Commission CE clearance? Clearance from other countries? And then we also weigh that against the potential risk. So what happens if the model generates a prediction that is a false positive, for example? What's the implication? And in the case, going back to our reveal for lower GI for colorectal cancer screening, the risk is extraordinarily low, right? The risk is, oh, you've identified a patient, you've targeted a patient and encouraged them to go in for something, for a procedure that already has been ordered by their physician, that is part of national standard screening protocols. So the risk is exceedingly low, right? No higher risk of an adverse outcome than if that patient had simply decided to go in for a screening colonoscopy on their own. Similar for another solution that we're deploying that focuses on identifying patients with undiagnosed diabetes. The next step, once you contact the patient, is, hey, it's time to go in and get an updated blood draw so we can run some updated blood labs on you and identify through a fasting blood glucose result or through an HbA1c result, identify whether you do in fact have strong risk factors for diabetes. There's exceedingly low risk for a patient to get a blood draw, and in fact, it's part of nationally accepted standard health prevention and maintenance activities for adults. So those are some of the things we consider when looking at algorithms, not just the quality and the level of sophistication and the regulatory status, if regulatory approval is warranted, but what's the risk of a false positive?
Okay, and Jeremy, I have another follow-up question for you about model developers, but before I ask that, just a reminder to our participants, we'll be getting to the Q&A session soon. So go ahead and start entering questions. Don't wait for us to announce Q&A. We'll get there in just a moment, and go ahead and fire away with your questions while we're talking. Jeremy, one more question about model development. So you're engaged with I guess commercial model developers, but can health systems get in on this game? Does your platform support the notion of a health system that uses your product developing models themselves and deploying the model either for their own use or maybe to commercialize the model that they've developed for use by other health systems?
Yeah, Pete, absolutely. And I may have mentioned this a little bit earlier, but we do have partnerships with health systems where those health systems have research departments, or they have, in certain academic areas, they have data scientists that are working with physicians and developing pretty sophisticated, interesting, innovative AI algorithms. And in many cases, those are deployed in one department, maybe for a couple of physicians. It may run on a little tower server that's stuffed underneath somebody's desk. Nobody really knows how often it's used. And it certainly can't be scaled, right? And often it's used on a retrospective basis or on a back-end basis. It hasn't been put together with a well-designed software solution user interface so that it can be most productive. So that's something we love doing. We have a couple of projects underway with teams at the Mayo Clinic on this. We have other health systems that we're beginning to work with, and it's exciting. It's exciting work, and we love the opportunity to help think through the challenges of taking something with potential, scaling it so that it can be deployed widely through the organization, and then evaluating, hey, could we commercialize this? And if so, how would we develop a financial model and a reliable statement of the patient outcome benefits so that it would have commercial traction?
Okay. Great, thank you.
Yeah.
And so we've got a few minutes left on the clock, and I'm certain that there are some questions lurking out there. I haven't seen anything come from the Q&A through the Q&A channel yet. So get your questions in while we have a few minutes left. While we're waiting for that, I'm going to ask the question myself, because I've heard this question from LogicStream customers in other discussions, in other contexts. So Jeremy, why, where does LogicStream fit here? Why does it make sense for LogicStream to be in part of a Lucem implementation?
I've lived and worked in Minneapolis for almost 3 decades now, and so I've gotten to watch and admire the LogicStream team and the products that it has developed. And so when we started working on developing these solutions, we recognized that because of LogicStream's data services capabilities, it would be an opportunity for LogicStream's customers to minimize any hassle with respect to data ingestion, the data ingestion that we need to support, whether it's one of the Reveal solutions or whether it's supporting any other internal development or enterprise scaling of tools by a LogicStream customer. So essentially, LogicStream has done so much of the hard work of ingesting, normalizing, standardizing the structure of data from different data sources. It allows Lucem to, at the direction of one of LogicStream's customers, it allows Lucem to tap into that data set. And our goal is that a LogicStream customer wouldn't have to lift a finger with respect to data integration because the work has already been done, and Lucem can simply build off of the data structure and the data set that LogicStream maintains for its customers.
Yep. And I'm gonna keep channeling questions that I've heard our customers ask before. And I'll give at least a partial answer, but Betsy or Jeremy, please fill in what important details that I might have missed here. So I've heard questions about, okay, so LogicStream's role here, we're the conduit for data to Lucem so that Lucem can do its thing. So what does that look like? What kind of data set are we talking about? Are we talking about PHI? Because that's obviously an important regulatory and patient privacy concern. And so the scenario here is Lucem would be a vendor to a health system. Obviously, you're licensing the Lucem software directly through Lucem, not through LogicStream. You're implementing it. You're taking advantage of the fact that LogicStream is already running at your health system, and LogicStream pulls from the LogicStream data model that already exists and prepares data specifically in the schema, the format required by Lucem. This is data that contains PHI. This is patient information, so it's the nature of the work that your staff is performing in Lucem that they require access to PHI. So not all LogicStream data services involve PHI. In fact, most LogicStream data services require a step for LogicStream to de-identify data. But in this case, since since your health system would be licensing the Lucem product, operating under a BAA with Lucem, that paves the way for the LogicStream data service to contain PHI. So Betsy, Jeremy, anything else you want to add to that? Anything I'm missing there?
One thing I could maybe add to this would be, in special projects, when we're sharing data, and this has occurred with Lucem, we do go through a process to understand the risk of re-identification, right? We do know that certain data elements, when put together in context, has the potential to re-identify a de-identified data set. So we do work with an expert out of Vanderbilt University that goes through the statistics of all of the identifiable types of fields and gives us guidance on those risks, and then we code everything to that. A good example would be things around like race and ethnicity. For low populations of certain groups, it would be very easy to re-identify, and so we recode those smaller groups as, say, unknown. So we're just listing Black, white, or unknown, things like that, to just really make sure that the data doesn't expose potential risk of re-identification, and that is to protect, patients at the end of the day, and we take that very seriously.
Thanks, Betsy. That's a great point. And Tim, to your point about PHI that is identifiable, I had an old colleague, former colleague, who said healthcare moves at the speed of trust. And so one of the first things that Lucem did was make sure that we had internal systems and processes that our customers could and will trust with respect to data protection. So we have our SOC 2 Type 2 certification. We obviously do all of the process and training and policy work that's necessary to maintain that. And I don't know if any of you have been through projects where you're evaluating new technologies, but most large health systems, just like our customers, put their vendors under a fair amount of scrutiny. So we've been through that scrutiny, and we're proud of the results, and we're proud of the architecture that we build, because we know that we need to maintain our customers' trust.
All right, and Michelle, we're at time, so over to you.
We are. Thank you, Jeremy, Betsy, Pete, for the thoughtful questions and great discussion. And thank you, all of our participants, for joining us. I know your schedules are very busy. We hope you found this informative and engaging. We'll follow up if there's any other questions that come in, and please reach out to your customer success team member if you have further questions or feedback. And as a reminder, we did record the session, so we'll be sending that out soon. And thanks again. Have a great day.